finest shoes. Yet in his shop on a high shelf sat a beautiful pair of leather shoes he had never sold nor worn. When asked about them, Eli would smile and say, "They're waiting for the right feet." Years passed and people came and went. Eli continued to craft shoes for others, boots for farmers, slippers for the elderly, sandals for children, always giving his best work to those in need, often without payment. One harsh winter, a young orphan named Toma wandered into the village with no shoes, his feet bloody and cold. He collapsed outside Eli's shop. Eli took him in, fed him, and without a word reached up and pulled down the perfect pair, the shoes he had never worn. They fit Toma exactly. The boy cried. "Why me?" Eli replied, "Because the right feet found their way." That night, Eli passed away peacefully in his chair. The next morning, Toma was found cleaning the cobbler's tools, a quiet promise in his eyes. Moral: some gifts are not meant to be used, but to be given, at the moment they matter most. Resilience isn't loud. It's the quiet choice to try again after everything says you shouldn't bother. After her layoff, her breakup, and the slow fading of friendships, Dana found herself in a studio apartment with blank walls and too much time. On the windowsill sat a houseplant she barely remembered buying. Its leaves were brown, its soil dry. It looked like her, forgotten and barely holding on. For days she stared at it, not out of hope, but because it was the only living thing in the room. She didn't water it. Until one Tuesday afternoon, after sending out her 37th job application with no response, she filled a glass. Not out of optimism, just action. The next morning, the plant didn't look better, but she watered it again, and again the next day. She began brushing her hair, taking walks, checking in on herself, the way she checked on the plant. She didn't bloom overnight. Neither did it. But by the third week, she noticed a tiny green shoot pushing from the stem. She touched it gently, then smiled. "You're trying," she whispered. "So am I." The moral of the story is this: emotional resilience isn't a roar, it's a whisper. I'm still here. You don't have to bounce back fast, you just have to water what's left until something grows again. If this story echoed a quiet struggle in your heart, pause today and honor your effort. You're doing more than you think, just by staying. Subscribe for more stories that hold space for your quiet victories, your tired strength, and your steady becoming.
Starting over doesn't always begin with a plan. Sometimes it starts with a quiet room, unfamiliar walls, and no curtains. After 20 years of marriage, Nora signed a lease on her first apartment, alone. It was small, noisy plumbing, the windows let in too much light, but it was hers. No shared closets, no second toothbrush, no pretending. The first night was the hardest. She unpacked slowly, not just things but memories. A pan from their first home, a photo she couldn't decide to frame or forget, a mug that said his. She left it at the back of the cabinet. There were no tears that night, just stillness. The kind that comes after a storm, when you're too tired to feel the damage and too hopeful to ignore the sky. For weeks, she sat by the window with no curtains. Neighbors passed by. Lights flickered across her floor. She thought, they can see in, but maybe I can finally see out. One morning, she brewed coffee in silence. Then, without thinking, she opened her laptop and looked up community classes, pottery, writing, salsa. She signed up for one, not to meet anyone, not to prove anything, just to begin, just to be new again. And as she closed the lid, she smiled. There were still no curtains, but there was light. The moral of the story is this: starting over isn't about forgetting the past, it's about choosing yourself in the present, even when the future still feels blurry. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need the courage to keep the window open. If you're standing at the edge of something new, scared, uncertain, raw, know this: you're not broken. You're just becoming. Subscribe for more stories that hold space for your restarts, rebuilds, and rebirths, one moment at a time. Self-worth isn't something we're given, it's something we return to after forgetting how much we already had. Adira bought the dress on a whim. It was bold, deep red, elegant, hugging in all the places she was taught to hide. She didn't buy it for an event. She bought it to challenge a voice in her head that kept saying, "You're too much, too loud, too curvy, too emotional." But she never wore it. For 2 years, it stayed in her closet, still in the bag, still with the tag, still waiting for her to believe she was allowed to feel beautiful without shrinking first. One day, after a meeting where she apologized 5 times for speaking with confidence, she came home, kicked off her shoes, and cried. Not because of what was said, but because of what she didn't stop. She walked to her closet, took out the dress, and this time she didn't try it on for a mirror. She tried it on for herself. She didn't tuck her stomach. She didn't pose. She just stood and breathed and said aloud, "This is me, and I am not too much." The next morning she wore it to the cafe, not for a date, not for a compliment, not for approval. She wore it because it was time. The moral of the story is this: self-worth doesn't arrive in someone else's words. It blooms when you stop apologizing for your presence. You are not too much, you are just enough. And the moment you believe that, the world begins to fit around you. If this story touched something tender in you, maybe it's time to stop waiting for permission. Wear the dress. Take up space. Be fully you. Subscribe for more stories that help you remember your worth, especially when you forget. Betrayal doesn't always break us in one moment. Sometimes it lingers, like a bruise beneath the skin, tender long after the hit. Elise had been married for 11 years. Not a perfect marriage, but one she fought for, believed in, protected. Until the email, short, thoughtless, misdelivered. Enough. The man she shared her life with had given his loyalty to someone else. She didn't scream. She didn't stay. She simply left, with a single suitcase, a worn journal, and a quiet kind of ache. For months, she lived in a small guest house behind her sister's place. She stopped answering messages, stopped trusting anyone who said, "You're strong, you'll get through this." Because healing didn't feel like strength. It felt like waking up alone, cooking for one, crying in the shower with the door locked. Then one day, while looking for a charger, she found a tiny, rusted key in the drawer. It wasn't hers, but she smiled, because it reminded her. Even locked things eventually open. Even forgotten keys once had purpose. That night, she wrote in her journal, not about him, but about herself. Not what was broken, but what was still whole. She didn't need the key, but she kept it anyway. Not as a memory of what had happened, but as a symbol of what she was finally unlocking inside herself. The moral of the story is this: betrayal may shatter your trust in others, but healing rebuilds your trust in yourself. The road back isn't loud or fast. It's slow, gentle, and filled with rediscoveries you didn't know you'd lost. If this story reached something buried inside you, know this: you're allowed to hurt, but you're also allowed to heal. Subscribe for more stories that speak to your strength. The quiet kind, the real kind. Not every door stays open, but sometimes the ones that close aren't locked. They're waiting. Marcel owned a small coffee shop on the corner of 5th and Lenox. For 22 years, it had been his sanctuary. Rich espresso, soft jazz, mismatched chairs, and handwritten notes from regulars taped to the walls. But time moved faster than memory. Customers slowed. Rent rose, and his hands, once steady, now trembled while pouring milk. He announced the closing on a Wednesday. No big speech, just a chalkboard sign. "Thank you for letting me serve your stories." People came, some cried, some just nodded. On the last night, after wiping the last table, he locked the door and sat in silence. Then, a knock. Outside stood a woman. Late 30s. Familiar eyes. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "I used to come here every morning before my shifts at the hospital. You always left a note on my cup. Breathe today in, you're doing enough." I never said it then, but those notes kept me going. She handed him an envelope. Inside, a letter and a key. "There's a small place next to the clinic. Need someone who understands comfort. We'd love to have your coffee and your notes." He stared, heart racing. The shop he built was ending. But maybe it wasn't the last chapter, just the end of the first. The moral of the story is this: second chances rarely look like first ones. They come quietly, in the form of kindness returned, or a stranger who remembered what you forgot you gave. If this story reminded you of something worth reopening, a dream, a place, a conversation, don't wait for perfect timing. Just knock and subscribe for more stories that help us remember. It's never too late to begin again.
We don't always carry what we need. Sometimes we carry what we're afraid to leave behind. After her divorce, Mira kept a single suitcase tucked high on the shelf of her closet. She never opened it, never needed what was inside. But she never threw it away. Years passed. She moved cities, switched jobs, grew stronger, but still. Inside were things she couldn't face: old letters, wedding photos, receipts from places they never returned to. Every time she reached for winter coats, she saw it. Heavy, silent, untouched, but never forgotten. One evening, her new partner, kind, patient, and never prying, asked, "What's in the suitcase?" She shrugged. "A life I haven't let go of yet." He didn't ask her to open it. He just said, "You don't have to carry it forever." Later that night, alone, she brought it down. She sat on the floor, one photo at a time, one tear at a time. Some things she kept, most she didn't. But when she zipped it shut for the last time, it felt lighter. The next morning, the suitcase was by the trash. And for the first time in years, she reached for her coat, and nothing stared back. The moral of the story is this: letting go isn't forgetting. It's freeing. We can honor the past without holding on to its weight. Sometimes healing begins with putting down what we thought we had to carry forever. If you've been holding on to something too long, a memory, a regret, a version of yourself, maybe today's the day you unzip the past and give yourself permission to move forward. Subscribe for more stories that help you reflect, release, and rebuild, one truth at a time.
You can love someone and still need space. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks only you control. Lena was 34, a quiet soul in a loud family. She was the one who always showed up. At birthdays, during emergencies, in group chats, she never started, but always answered. But lately, showing up felt heavier than helpful. Her phone buzzed constantly. "Can you pick up Mom's meds? Why didn't you answer yesterday? You're being distant lately." Lena had just come home from work. Her fridge was empty. Her eyes sore, her chest tight. She sank into the chair by the window, the only quiet corner in her apartment. She thought, if I don't answer, am I selfish or just finally tired? That night, she didn't reply. Instead, she poured tea. She read a chapter. She let the messages pile up, not out of anger, but choice. The next morning, she called. "I love you all," she said, calm but firm. "But I need space too. From now on, I won't always pick up. I won't always say yes, but when I do, it'll be because I can, not because I must." There was confusion, silence. Then slowly, respect. Some messages slowed down, some stopped. But her peace, it stayed. And the chair by the window, it became sacred. The moral of the story is this: boundaries don't push people away. They bring you back to yourself. Saying no doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to protect what's left of you. So you can give with choice, not resentment. If this story spoke to something you felt but never said, maybe it's time. Not out of guilt, but out of truth. Subscribe for more real-life stories. Taking care of others should never mean forgetting yourself. Sometimes honesty costs something, but silence often costs more. Jonas was a freelance carpenter in his 40s, good with his hands, quiet with his words. He built furniture with care, the kind that felt like it belonged to generations. One summer, he took a contract for a wealthy client. Elegant home, clean lawn, everything polished but distant. The job was small, a set of hand-carved chairs. He finished ahead of schedule, sanded every edge, double-checked every joint. When it was done, the client transferred the payment. Generous, too generous. Jonas noticed the extra zero immediately. He stared at the screen. This money could fix his truck, pay off the loan. No one would know. The invoice was vague, the work was done. He wrestled with the thought, late into the night. Pride whispered, "You earned it." Need whispered louder, "Take it." But honesty, quiet as always, asked, "Can you sit in the chairs you built, knowing they rest on a lie?" The next morning, Jonas sent a message. "You overpaid me. Here's the correct amount. I've returned the rest." Silence. Then a short reply, "Thank you. No one ever does that." Weeks later, a letter arrived. A new job, a recommendation, and a handwritten note. Integrity lasts longer than oak. The moral of the story is this: honesty doesn't always give immediate rewards, but it builds a life you don't have to look over your shoulder to live. In a world full of shortcuts, truth may seem slow, but it always arrives exactly where it's meant to go. If this story made you pause, ask yourself, what's one truth you've been holding back, and what peace might it bring to let it out? Subscribe for more grounded, grown-up stories that reflect real choices, real people, and real lessons. Gratitude isn't about what you have. It's about noticing what you'd miss if it was gone. In a quiet village near the cliffs, a blind musician named Sifa sat by the same bench every evening, playing a soft melody on her wooden flute. Most people passed by. Some dropped coins, but one little boy came every day, not to listen, but to sit beside her. His name was Arel. He never spoke, but every afternoon he'd bring her a pebble, polished, smooth, and warm from his pocket. She'd smile, touch it, and thank him. Sometimes she'd hum a tune just for him. One day the boy didn't come, not the next day, not the one after. The bench felt colder, her songs quieter, her hands empty. A week passed before his mother came with tears in her eyes. "He always said you made the world feel kind again," she whispered. "He wanted to give you something beautiful, even if all he had were stones." Sepha clutched her bag of pebbles. They weren't just stones. They were thank yous in disguise. From that day forward, she played a new melody, gentler, woven with memory and love. And on her flute, she tied a pebble with a string, so it would never fall. The moral of the story is this: gratitude isn't found in grand gestures. Sometimes it hides in a warm pebble or a quiet presence. What we take for granted today may be the very thing we ache for tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, pause and look around. Say thank you. Even for the smallest things, especially for them. And subscribe for more stories that help you see the world with gentler eyes.
Trust isn't built in comfort. It's tested in the space between fear and a helping hand. High in the mist-covered mountains, two villages were separated by a deep canyon. Only one bridge connected them, a fragile rope bridge that swayed with the wind and creaked with age. Few dared to cross it. But one day, a terrible fire broke out in the far village. Help had to come, fast. A young woman named Nara stepped forward. She was not the strongest, not the loudest, but she had once seen her father cross that bridge with nothing but steady hands and calm breath. Now she stood at the edge. Behind her, villagers holding ropes. Ahead, a boy waiting on the other side, too scared to return alone. Nara took the first step. The bridge moaned. Halfway across, the wind howled. The planks shifted. She froze. Then, a voice from behind. "Nara, we're holding the ropes. You won't fall. Just walk." She took another step, and then another. When she reached the boy, she smiled, offered her hand and whispered, "Now trust me." Together they walked back, slow but sure, not because the bridge was strong, but because someone believed in the strength behind it. The moral of the story is this: trust isn't about certainty. It's about connection. Sometimes the ground beneath us shakes, but when the people behind us hold steady, we find the courage to move forward. If this story reminded you of someone who held your rope in a storm, thank them. Or better yet, be that steady hand for someone else today. Subscribe for more stories that remind us we're never really walking alone.
Wisdom doesn't shout, it waits, and it speaks loudest when we're finally ready to listen. In a quiet mountain town, there lived a wandering teacher known simply as Aya. She didn't carry scrolls, only a small teapot, and people came from faraway lands to hear her speak. One day, a young scholar arrived, proud and loud, his bag filled with books and opinions. "I've studied philosophy, science, and law," he declared. "I've read more than most will in a lifetime." Aya smiled gently and poured him tea. He kept talking about logic, history, and how others misunderstood the world. He glanced down. The cup was full. Still, she poured. Tea spilled over, dripping across the table. "Stop," he snapped. "It's already full. Can't you see?" Aya looked up calmly. "Exactly," she said. "How can I share anything with someone already overflowing with themselves?" The scholar froze. The room went quiet. He looked at the puddle, then at his bag of books, and then he bowed. That day, he stayed not to speak, but to listen. The moral of the story is this: wisdom flows into the hearts that make space for it. The smartest person in the room isn't the one who speaks most, but the one who listens deeply and learns quietly. If this story opened your heart, even just a little, make space for stillness. That's where wisdom waits. And subscribe for more stories that feed your spirit and awaken your mind.
Every champion was once a contender who refused to give up. Have you ever felt close to giving up on something you truly wanted? Everyone who achieved their dreams has stood exactly where you are, uncertain, tired, and tested. The difference? They simply chose to keep going. Refuse to quit today. Embrace the fight. Hold tight to your goals and become the champion your future self will thank you for.
You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Have you ever hesitated to start something new because you feared you weren't good enough? You're not alone. Everyone who achieved greatness began with doubt, uncertainty, and imperfections. Greatness is not a prerequisite, it's a result. Begin now, even if you're unsure. Every small effort brings you closer to mastery. Take action today. Your greatness is waiting on the other side of your first step.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Ever felt overwhelmed by the size of your dreams, wondering if you'll ever reach them? You're not alone. Every great achievement started exactly where you are now, uncertain, hopeful, and faced with that first daunting step. Take that first step today. Break down your big goal into manageable actions and trust the process. Remember, every incredible journey starts small, and your first step could change everything.
Envy is a quiet thief. It steals not what others have, but what we no longer see in ourselves. In a small hilltop village known for its candle makers, lived two neighbors, Tomas and Elian. Both were gifted, but only one would be chosen each year to light the ceremonial candle for the village festival. For 3 years in a row, Elian's candle had been chosen. His flames burned longer, brighter, and with scents no one could name. He smiled humbly, but Tomas could only see the crowd around him. The praise, the admiration, the applause. So this year, Tomas tried something different. He crafted a candle tinted green, laced with herbs, rare wax, even a touch of silver. On the night of the festival, as Elian placed his usual candle, Tomas pushed forward. "Try mine," he said, eyes gleaming. The crowd was drawn to its beauty. They lit it, and for a moment, it burned with a hypnotic green glow. But then, the smoke turned thick, the scent turned sour. People coughed. The flames sputtered, then died. The priest stepped back. "This candle is clever, but it's not made with care. It's made with envy." Tomas stood frozen, humiliated, not because his candle failed, but because he'd forgotten why he ever loved making them at all. The moral of the story is this: envy creates shadows, even in those once filled with light. True greatness doesn't bloom from comparison. It grows quietly in the heart, lit by passion, not pride. If this story reminded you to focus on your own light, not someone else's, share it with someone chasing their own spark. And subscribe for more stories that help us reflect, feel, and grow. The letter beneath the floorboard. Some wounds are visible, and some forgiveness is never asked for, only found. In a sun-faded house at the edge of a quiet village, Mara returned after 30 years. She hadn't spoken to her father since the day she stormed out, young, angry, and certain she'd never forgive him. He was gone now. The house was hers, but it didn't feel like home. She moved through the dusty rooms like a stranger. Photos on the wall, her old piano untouched, and in her father's bedroom, silence, until a loose floorboard caught her foot. Underneath, wrapped in yellowed cloth, she found a small wooden box. Inside, letters, dozens, all addressed to her, all unopened. The first one read, "I wasn't good with words when it mattered. I see that now. Every day without you has been a lesson. If you ever find these, I hope you'll know I never stopped trying to be better, even in your absence." Tears fell, not out of guilt, but release. She stayed in that room for hours, reading. The man she had hated was gone, but so was the anger. What remained was softer. What remained was forgiveness. The moral of the story is this: forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it heals the heart carrying it. Sometimes peace isn't given, it's uncovered beneath the silence, beneath the years, beneath the pain. If this story touched something in you, maybe it's time to open a letter or write one. Subscribe for more stories that help us feel, reflect, and sometimes forgive. Pride is a strange thing. It can lift us up or blind us as we fall. In a quiet village surrounded by wind-swept hills, there lived a young craftsman named Darrow. His talent for carving birds from wood was unmatched. Smooth wings, lifelike feathers, frozen in flight, and he knew it. People came from nearby towns to see his birds. Children pointed in wonder. Elders called his hands blessed. One day, a frail old man asked, "Teach me how to carve wings like yours." Darrow scoffed. "These hands aren't for lessons. They're for greatness." He built taller displays, raised his prices, and carved alone. But the more praise he chased, the colder his workshop became. Years passed. His birds no longer flew off the shelves. Another artist had come, not as skilled, but warm, humble, generous. Darrow, bitter, went to the mountaintop to find inspiration. There, he found a broken bird, real, breathing, struggling in the wind. He carved a splint, held it, waited. And as the sun rose, the bird flew, crooked but free. For the first time in years, Darrow cried, not because he had lost his fame, but because he had forgotten why he carved in the first place. The moral of the story is this: pride builds pedestals, but compassion builds purpose. Greatness isn't in being praised, it's in lifting others, even when no one is watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who may need a reminder that true greatness comes from humility, not applause. Subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart and awaken the soul.
Not all lies are spoken aloud. Some are framed in gold, polished to shine and sold as truth. In the heart of a bustling old market, there was a man who sold mirrors. His stall was the most beautiful, wrapped in silks and glowing with lantern light. But his mirrors, oh, they didn't reflect reality. They reflected only what you wanted to see. People came from far and wide to look at themselves. A crooked merchant saw a noble man. A cruel lover saw tenderness in his eyes. A thief saw a hero. And they smiled, because the mirror agreed. The seller whispered, "The truth is overrated. Beauty sells better." One day, a quiet woman in rags stepped up. She looked into the mirror and saw a queen. But instead of smiling, she frowned. She turned to him and said, "This isn't me. I don't want to be flattered. I want to be seen." He laughed. "No one wants the truth, dear. Just a sweeter lie." But she didn't walk away. She lifted a cracked old mirror from her satchel, dusty, dim, and unadorned. People gathered, curious. They looked and saw themselves, flaws, wrinkles, and all. But then something strange happened. They didn't flinch. They looked longer, and they began to weep. And then they smiled, real smiles. The mirror seller watched his crowd vanish, not with fear, but with freedom, and he was left alone, staring at 1,000 perfect lies. with no one left to believe them. A moral of the story is this: deception may bring applause, but truth builds connection. A lie tells you what you wish to be, but the truth helps you become who you are meant to be.
Sometimes courage doesn't sound like a roar. It whispers from within when no one else is watching. In a sleepy coastal village, there stood a lighthouse, tall, weathered, and watching over the restless sea. Its bell, once used to warn ships in the fog, hadn't rung in years. But its story hadn't ended yet. Lena was just 12 when the storm came. Her father was a fisherman, tough as the salt on his coat. He hadn't returned by nightfall. The waves roared louder than usual, and the village lights flickered. Rumors whispered he was lost to the sea. The grown-ups huddled indoors, afraid of the wind, afraid of hope. But Lena refused to accept silence. She wrapped her scarf tight, grabbed a lantern, and walked straight into the storm. Her boots sank in the wet sand, and the sea clawed at her steps, but she kept walking, all the way to the lighthouse. Inside, the stairs groaned under her weight. She climbed, breathless, until she reached the bell tower. She lit the beacon, but it wasn't enough. With trembling hands, she pulled the rusted rope. The bell cried out, once, then again, and far in the darkness, between waves and wind, she saw it. A flicker, a boat, a hand waving. The moral of the story is this: courage doesn't wait for permission. It rises when fear tells you to sit still. Sometimes the bravest hearts are the smallest, and one act of courage can be the light that brings someone home.
The Trader's Mirror. A traveling trader once visited a poor village and promised to trade anything for gold. Among his wares was a strange item no one had ever seen, a smooth, shiny object that reflected faces. It was a mirror. A vain young man saw his own reflection and thought the mirror held magic. "It shows beauty," he whispered. Fearing others would see the same and desire it, he traded his family's only goat for it. Days passed, and the village mocked him. "What use is a mirror when your stomach is empty?" they laughed. Ashamed, the young man realized he had traded value for vanity. The moral of the story is this: true worth lies in substance, not in shine.
The Whispering Wall. In a quiet coastal village, there stood an ancient stone wall said to echo back only the truth. Curious travelers often spoke to it, testing its wisdom. One day, a boastful man arrived, claiming he was the richest, wisest, and kindest of all. He laughed and shouted at the wall, "Who is greater than I?" The wall whispered back, "Your shadow." Embarrassed and confused, the man stormed off. The villagers smiled, knowing what the wall meant. A person's image may be large, but it's often just a reflection, not the truth. The moral of the story is this: pride speaks loudly, but truth answers softly.
The Masked Merchant. In an ancient desert town, a mysterious merchant arrived wearing a golden mask. He sold rare gems at astonishingly low prices. The townspeople, eager for a bargain, flocked to him daily. But one cautious old woman watched from a distance. Why would someone hide their face if their trade is honest? She whispered. One night, a curious boy followed the merchant to the edge of town. There, under the moonlight, the merchant removed his mask, revealing not a man, but a cunning bandit planning to vanish before sunrise. By morning, the stall was gone, and so were the townspeople's coins. Only the old woman had kept her money and her wisdom. The moral of the story is this: not everything that glitters is gold. Beware those who hide their true face. The Painted Jackal. A hungry jackal once wandered into a village and fell into a vat of blue dye left by the washerman. Startled by his new look, he realized he no longer resembled a jackal at all. Seizing the chance, he returned to the jungle and declared, "I am a creature sent by the gods to rule over you." The other animals, seeing his strange and dazzling color, believed him, and made him their king. For a while, the jackal enjoyed his power, being obeyed and praised. But one night, he heard a pack of jackals howling in the distance. Overcome by instinct, he howled back. The jungle animals recognized the sound immediately. "You're just a jackal," they cried. Exposed and disgraced, the painted jackal was chased away and left alone once again. The moral of the story is this: deception may gain you power, but your true nature will always reveal itself.
The Farmer and the Snake. On a bitter winter morning, a kind-hearted farmer was walking along a frozen path when he stumbled upon a snake, stiff and nearly lifeless from the cold. Moved by compassion, the farmer picked it up and tucked it gently inside his coat to warm it. As the farmer walked, the snake slowly regained warmth and life. But as soon as it felt strong enough, it turned on the very man who saved it and bit him. Shocked and in pain, the farmer collapsed to the ground. With his last breath, he looked at the ungrateful creature and said, "I saved you. Why would you do this?" The snake hissed, "You knew what I was when you picked me up." The moral of the story is this: never show kindness to the ungrateful. Some natures cannot be changed. Weena was cleaning out her late mother's bookshelf when she found an old poetry book, its spine cracked, pages yellowed. Inside the margin of one poem, she noticed a faint pencil mark, then another and another. They weren't underlines or notes. They were full sentences written sideways in the margins, like a secret journal hidden between verses. Unread, "Today I cried in the kitchen, but the sun still rose." Another, "Lena laughed so hard at dinner. That laugh saved me." Lena sat down and wept, the pages trembling in her hands. Her mother had never said these things out loud, but she had left them, written in poetry, hiding in plain sight. The moral lesson is this: sometimes the truest feelings are written where no one looks. Love can live between the lines.
Turtles are time travelers, and I have proof. Turtles, everyone thinks they're slow, harmless, and wise. Cute little ancient reptiles just vibing, right? Wrong. Turtles aren't slow because they're lazy. They're out of sync with our timeline. They move slowly because they're adjusting to the speed of this reality. Think about it. They live for over 100 years without even trying. That's not biology. That's chronological resilience. They were built to survive time storms. And their shells? Not armor. That's a temporal stabilizer. Portable distortion field. Protects them when they slip between centuries. Ever notice how turtles just disappear into water and you can't find them again? They're not swimming away, they're phasing out. One minute they're sunbathing, next minute they're attending a medieval joust. Also, why do they always look wise? Because they were there. The fall of Rome, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the invention of TikTok. They saw it all, and they're judging us. Quietly, from behind their bulletproof time capsules. We think we're moving forward. Turtles already know how it ends. They're just waiting for the right moment to pop the shell open and reset the timeline.
An empty seat can be the greatest invitation. An old man named Joseph set an extra chair at his dinner table every night, though he lived alone. Neighbors whispered. Some thought he was mad, others felt pity. One evening, a curious child from next door asked, "Why do you put out another chair if nobody's coming?" Joseph smiled softly. "For hope," he said. "One day, someone will sit there." Seasons changed. One winter's night, the boy knocked on Joseph's door. With a plate of cookies and his little sister by his side, Joseph smiled wider than he had in years. The chair was finally filled. The moral lesson is this: sometimes love and connection need nothing but patience and an open heart.
Once upon a time, in a quiet village at the edge of a misty forest, two childhood friends, Leela and Theo, shared everything: games, secrets, and dreams. Their favorite dream was to someday find the legendary Hidden Garden, a place rumored to grant one true wish to those who discovered it. One afternoon, after finishing their chores, Leela and Theo decided, let's finally find the garden today. But as they ventured deeper into the misty woods, a fork in the path appeared. The sign was there, worn and faded, with 2 arrows. One pointed to a dark, rocky trail that seemed dangerous. The other led to a sunny, easy-looking path filled with wildflowers. Theo, without hesitation, said, "The sunny path must be the way." But then, Leela hesitated. She remembered the old tales, saying the true path to the garden was always hidden behind hardship, not comfort. Maybe the rough trail is the real one, she suggested. Therefore, they made a bold decision. They would split up. Theo would follow the sunny path, and Lila would take the rocky trail. They agreed to meet back at the old oak tree by sunset. Lila climbed steep rocks, got scratched by brambles, and stumbled through thick mud. It was exhausting and at times scary. Meanwhile, Theo's path was full of pleasant sights, flowers, soft grass, and singing birds, but it simply circled back to the village. And then, as the sun dipped low, Leela, battered but determined, pushed through a wall of thorns and gasped. Before her stood a hidden gate covered in ivy. She had found the hidden garden. Inside, the garden shimmered with colors she had never seen. A stone pedestal stood at its center, and atop it, a single golden flower. A voice whispered on the wind, "One true wish, pure of heart, may bloom the impossible." Leela closed her eyes and made a wish, not for riches nor fame, but for one hidden garden someday too. When she returned, Theo was waiting, disappointed but smiling. Leela simply hugged him tightly, feeling the magic of her wish already at work. Moral of the story is this: the right path is often the hardest one, but it's the one that leads to true treasures.
Goat, and I have proof. You ever look at a goat and just feel weird? Like your brain short circuits for a second? That's because goats aren't supposed to be here. They're timeline glitches. Leftovers from an alternate reality that accidentally slipped into ours. Look at the facts. Rectangular pupils. What Earth animal needs eyes shaped like ancient doorways? That's not vision. That's a portal alignment system. And goats can climb vertical cliffs like it's nothing? Full Spider-Man mode with no equipment? Yeah, sure. Makes sense. If they evolved in a timeline where gravity was optional, and the noises they make, half of them don't even sound like animals. They sound like a grown man shouting his soul into a void. That's dimensional feedback. You think goat yoga is a cute wellness trend? No. That's ritual preparation. The goats are training humans to accept their physical presence before the great timeline merge. Why do they randomly freeze and fall over when startled? Oh, it's a genetic disorder. No, my friend, that's temporal desync. They're buffering, like a bad Wi-Fi connection between universes. One day, a goat's going to blink sideways, stretch its body into a 9-foot-tall shadow beast, and casually walk through a crack in the sky. And we'll all realize that we were never the original timeline, they were.
The Sparrow in the Storm. High atop a misty cliff, there was a mighty oak tree that had stood for centuries. Birds of every kind nested there. Hawks, eagles, ravens, each proud of their strength and grandeur. Among them lived a small, plain sparrow, unnoticed and often mocked by the grander birds. One day, dark clouds gathered and a ferocious storm approached. The great birds boasted, flapping their powerful wings, saying they would outfly the storm and conquer the skies. When the winds howled and lightning cracked, the eagles and hawks soared high, only to be tossed and battered by the fury of the storm. But the little sparrow did something different. Instead of fighting the wind, she tucked her wings, stayed low, and sheltered herself within the roots of the mighty oak. When the storm passed, the sky cleared, and only the sparrow remained. The grand birds returned, broken, wounded, or not at all. The villagers who lived nearby whispered, the sparrow survived not by fighting the storm, but by respecting his power. The moral lesson is this: True strength is not always in standing against the storm, but in knowing when to yield and survive. The rope and the crown. In an ancient kingdom, strength was measured by who could pull the king's golden chariot uphill during the Festival of Might. Nobles, soldiers, and even entire teams of warriors struggled year after year, each trying to prove their power. Yet one year, the king changed the challenge. He placed the crown at the top of the steepest hill and tied a long rope to it. "Whoever brings the crown to me," he said, "shall have it." The strongest men rushed forward, grabbing the rope and pulling with all their might. Some slipped, some fought among themselves, and others collapsed from exhaustion. Days passed, but no one succeeded. Finally, a quiet woman named Amara, known more for her wisdom than her strength, approached. She studied the rope, walked the hill, and realized something simple. Pulling wasn't the answer. Instead, she climbed the hill, hand over hand, following the rope to the crown itself. She lifted it gently and carried it back down without struggle. The king smiled. Many believe power lies in force, but true power lies in understanding. The moral lesson is this: power isn't always about pulling harder. It's about seeing more clearly.
Octopuses are aliens testing the waters, and I have proof. You ever really look at an octopus? I mean, really look? That's not Earth technology. That's some straight-up extraterrestrial engineering. 8 arms, 3 hearts, blue blood, camouflage skin, problem-solving skills. That's not a sea creature. That's a recon drone from another galaxy. They can open jars from the inside. They can unscrew lids. They can recognize individual humans. What other animal builds an escape plan like a prison architect, and they don't have bones? None. They can fit through a hole the size of a quarter. Name one Earth species that acts like that besides Wi-Fi signals. Also, they just change colors and textures like a glitchy simulation. Oh, it's for defense. Yeah, sure. And my grandma's smartphone updates itself for defense too. Octopuses have been found walking on land. Walking. They can survive short periods outside of water like it's no big deal. You think they're stuck in oceans? Nah, they're just studying our planet in stealth mode. Every aquarium with an octopus? That's not a zoo. That's a temporary alien embassy. They're waiting, gathering data, and one day, they'll emerge from the deep. Fluent in every human weakness, fluent in every escape route, ready, watching, tentacles loaded. Octopuses aren't seafood, they're scouts, and they know exactly who you are.
The coin in the river. In a village divided by a great river, there was a tradition. Once a year, villagers would toss coins into the waters, hoping for fortune and favor. The wealthiest threw gold, while the poor could only offer simple stones or prayers. One year, a terrible drought struck, and the river dried into a muddy trail. Walking along its cracked bed, a young boy named Elias found a single coin gleaming in the muck. A gold piece, heavier and finer than anything he had ever owned. Starving and desperate, he could have kept it. But instead, Elias walked to the temple at the heart of the village and placed the coin in the offering bowl, whispering, "May it serve many, not just me." That night, rain returned, stronger and purer than anyone remembered. The river filled, crops revived, and the village celebrated. When the elders asked who had placed the gold that broke the drought, Elias stayed silent. Only the old temple keeper knew, and he smiled, saying, "The river does not answer the loudest voices, but the truest hearts." The moral lesson is this: true fortune flows to those who give when taking is easier.
Once upon a time, in a cold and frosty village surrounded by a dense forest, there lived a little sparrow named Sophie. Sophie was known for her adventurous spirit but also for her tendency to act before thinking. One winter morning, as Sophie flew over the forest, she noticed something strange: a deer trapped on a frozen lake. The deer had wandered too far from the shore, and the ice beneath its hooves was starting to crack. But Sophie hesitated. "I'm just a tiny bird," she thought. "How can I possibly help a deer?" Yet, as she saw the fear in the deer's eyes, Sophie knew she couldn't just fly away. Determined, Sophie soared down to the edge of the lake, where she spotted a group of squirrels and a beaver nearby. "The deer is in trouble," Sophie chirped urgently. "We need to help." But then, the animals looked at her doubtfully. "How can we possibly save something so big?" asked a squirrel. Sophie didn't have an answer, but she flapped her wings with determination. "If we work together, we can find a way." Therefore, Sophie and the animals hatched a plan. The beaver gnawed down a sturdy branch and carefully slid it across the ice toward the deer. The squirrels carried ropes from a nearby shed, tying them to the branch so the deer could grip it with its teeth. Sophie encouraged the deer to stay calm and not move too much. The ice creaked dangerously and the cold wind howled, but the animals didn't give up. Pulling with all their might, they slowly guided the deer toward the shore. And then, with one final effort, the deer was free. It stumbled onto solid ground, shivering but safe. The deer bowed its head in gratitude, tears glistening in its eyes. "Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, everyone. I owe you my life." From that day forward, the animals of the forest admired Sophie's bravery and quick thinking. She had proven that no challenge was too great when courage and teamwork came together. Courage inspires teamwork, and together, even the impossible can be achieved.
The silent flute. In a kingdom where music was celebrated above all else, there lived a boy named Cale who owned a flute that made no sound. It had been passed down from his grandfather, who claimed it was the most precious instrument in the world. At festivals, musicians would laugh when Cale raised the flute to his lips and played nothing but silence. Crowds would sneer, calling it worthless. Still, Cale treasured it, believing his grandfather's words. One year, a dark mist fell over the kingdom. No musician could pierce it with their songs. The crops withered, the rivers slowed, and despair grew thick in the air. A desperate call went out. "Bring any music that can break the curse." Cale came forward, holding his silent flute. The court mocked him, but the king, exhausted by hopelessness, allowed him to try. Cale lifted the flute, and though no sound escaped, a powerful stillness filled the hall. The mist trembled. It was not noise the kingdom needed, but pure, heartfelt silence, the kind that clears sorrow and plants hope anew. As Cale stood playing his silent song, the mist retreated, and light poured into the kingdom once more. The moral lesson is this: sometimes the greatest power lies not in what is heard, but in what is felt in silence.
The mirror with no reflection. In a distant land, a mysterious merchant arrived in the capital with only one item: a tall, ancient mirror draped in velvet. He claimed it had no reflection, but could show a person who they truly were. Curious nobles, warriors, and even the queen herself came to look. One by one, they pulled back the velvet and stared. But the mirror showed nothing. No face, no image, just emptiness. They scoffed. "A trick," they said. "It's broken." The mirror remained silent. But then, a servant girl named Mina, who had come only to clean the floor, glanced into it as she walked past and gasped. In the mirror, she saw herself comforting a crying child, feeding a hungry traveler, and helping a limping dog, things she had done quietly, with no thought of reward. The mirror shone with soft golden light, and for the first time it reflected someone. The merchant smiled. The mirror does not reveal who you wish to be, but who you are when no one is watching. He left the next day, the mirror still in the square, but only few dared look again. The moral lesson is this: true character is not what you show, it's what you do when you believe no one sees.
Dogs are undercover agents, and I have proof. Look, I love dogs. We all do. But that's exactly how they get us. Dogs are too loyal, too obedient, too good at reading emotions. That's not love. That's training. Think about it. They listen for keywords like walk and treat, but somehow ignore get off the couch every time. That's selective surveillance. And the tail wagging? That's just a distraction protocol. While you're smiling like a fool, they're scanning your home with sonar ears. You ever notice how dogs randomly bark at nothing? Yeah, that's not random. That's code transmission. They bark. The neighbor's dog barks. Then a third dog 3 blocks down responds. You just witnessed a data relay. And those belly rubs they love? That's a pressure-activated recharge port. Police dogs, military dogs, search and rescue. You think those are special breeds? No, they're agents on assignment. Man's best friend? More like man's assigned handler. And if you think your dog doesn't judge you, check again. They saw what you Googled last night, and they're filing a report. So next time you hear a bark at 3 a.m., just know the mission is active.
The thread of gold. In a kingdom known for its weavers, a poor tailor named Imran lived in a small hut at the edge of town. He was known not for his wealth, but for his patience and honesty. One day he found a single golden thread glimmering in a bundle of scrap cloth he'd bought from the market. He could have sold it. Instead, he stitched it into the hem of a simple cloak meant for a beggar who had torn his last garment. "Let someone feel rich for once," Imran said with a smile. The beggar wore the cloak proudly, unaware of the golden thread. Days later, he was struck by a passing carriage. The nobleman inside rushed out, and upon seeing the cloak, thought the man must be someone of hidden importance. He ordered him to be treated and fed. As they spoke, the noble was moved by the beggar's honesty and humility. Impressed, he asked who had given him the cloak. The beggar told him of the humble tailor at the edge of town. Imran was summoned, not for punishment, but for praise. The noble commissioned him as the royal tailor, saying, "A man who sees worth in others creates worth in the world." The moral lesson is this: a small act of honor can stitch greatness into the fabric of life.
Canceling a subscription is a full-blown psychological thriller. Trying to cancel a subscription online is like trying to break up with someone who refuses to acknowledge the relationship is over. You start out confident. You log in like, "I got this," just a couple clicks. 2 hours later, you're sweating, your credit card's still being charged, and somehow you're subscribed to more things than when you started. These companies hide the cancel button like it's the Ark of the Covenant. You go to settings, billing, account preferences, advanced options. Are you sure? We're sorry to see you go. Maze Simulator 3000. Then it hits you with the guilt trip. Before you go, can you tell us why? Yeah, because I don't need $14.99 a month to stream documentaries about alpacas narrated by Benedict Cumberbatch. And then the offers start rolling in. Wait, how about 50% off? Where was that energy when I was poor and desperate 2 weeks ago? Eventually, they make you call someone. Oh no, not a human. The one thing millennials fear more than death, an unscheduled phone call. You're on the line with someone named Kevin in customer retention, who sounds like he's been trained by the CIA. He's like, "Can I ask why you're leaving us?" "No, Kevin, I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving your dark magic billing labyrinth. Don't take it personally." Then, just when you think you're free, you get the final email. Your subscription will remain active until the end of the billing cycle. Translation: we're taking one more payment just to spite you. Mwahaha. At this point, I don't want a refund. I want an apology, a therapist, and a commemorative t-shirt that says, "I tried to cancel and all I got was emotionally wrecked."
Cows are not who you think they are, and I have proof. Everyone thinks cows are harmless, just big, slow, grass-chomping milk machines. Wrong. Cows are too calm, like they've seen things, or caused things. You ever looked into a cow's eyes? That's not confusion. That's containment. They're holding back a language older than mankind. Moo? No. That's a coded frequency. Only other cows understand. Ever notice how they stare at nothing? That's meditation or surveillance, possibly both. And they always stand in groups, never facing each other, never talking, just syncing. It's like they're downloading updates from the atmosphere. And when they chew slowly, they're not eating, they're processing. Why do cows have 4 stomachs? Because you can't store that much classified information in just one. Cows don't run unless they choose to. And when they do, it's controlled chaos, like they're testing their emergency escape protocol. Don't be fooled by the bells and spots. These creatures are biological black boxes. One day, the cows will rise, and will realize we were the herd all along.
Once upon a time, there was a man named Rafi who lived in a remote village built at the foot of a mountain. Every morning, Rafi would walk up the path carrying a heavy bag of stones. Villagers would watch and whisper, "Why burden yourself with what you don't need?" But Rafi never answered. But one day, a curious traveler named Mira stopped him on the path. "Where are you taking all those stones?" she asked. Rafi replied, "To the top of the mountain." "Why?" he paused. "Because I must." But then, Mira decided to follow him. The path was steep and winding, and the sun was unforgiving. Rafi never stopped, never complained. Occasionally, he would set one stone down at the edge of the path and continue with the rest. Mira noticed each stone he placed wasn't random. It created a step, a wall, a safe edge for others. The trail behind them was becoming easier to walk. Therefore, she asked, "You've been building the path all this time?" Rafi nodded. "I once fell here and almost lost my life. No one helped me up, so I decided I would leave behind something for others to climb on." Mira was silent. The burden Rafi carried wasn't his own. It was his way of preventing someone else's fall. And then, when they reached the top, Mira looked down at the winding trail, now marked with stones of safety and strength. "Why didn't you tell people?" she asked.